So warm welcome. Thanks for joining today and kind of spending some time with me around cloud application security. I'm going to walk you through the kind of current state of the landscape when it comes to the proliferation, I guess, of SaaS applications. Obviously, there's potential risks that go with it, some of the pitfalls that you need to look out for, and hopefully the best way to balance your security posture without disrupting your users, because that's going to be kind of a key thread throughout all this this presentation. So I guess by way of introduction, for those that don't know me, have met me before, Gareth Lockwood. I'm VP of Product and Go-to-Market here at Sentinet. I've been in the industry for quite some time now, over 2 decades at vendors, in consulting, and also in end user kind of IT support. So kind of witnessed it on both sides of the desk as to the things that can and do go wrong and kind of how to fix them. Now, the idea today is really to talk about the Sentinet ethos, our approach, our architecture when it comes to securing cloud applications. That's what we're all here to think about. As a product person myself, I always kind of think about really seeing is believing. So what I'm going to do as well after this is give you a little bit of a look behind the curtain at our platform. It is it's kind of much detail that we have the time to. Hopefully it's enough of a teaser. We can continue our conversation at a little bit of a later date. So with that in mind, let's kind of crack on. And just to set some of the expectations about what I'm going to talk about today. Obviously, I'd love to jump straight in, show you the product and all the cool things and unique things that we've got in our platform. But obviously, it's going to be really valuable just to set some of that context, how we differ from many of the other CASB point products out there, some of the things to look out for, some of the questions to ask and things to consider when you go and decide, yep, we need to secure our cloud applications, we need to help protect our users, but what are those next steps? How do we evaluate and how do we enhance our existing security stack if we've got one? One example here might be Microsoft, for instance. We see this proliferation of Microsoft 365 portfolio, very popular. It's effectively ubiquitous now. So I'll do a quick, kind of very quick and dirty side-by-side comparison for those that are new to CASB, kind of perhaps know or don't know what features and experiences to look out for when you're doing an evaluation. So I'll split this into 2, perhaps spend 20 minutes or so giving you that kind of background context, and then another 20 minutes deeper dive into the platform itself. Obviously, it does a lot more than just cloud security, but that's the area I'm going to focus on today. But as I said, hopefully it's enough of an eye-opener that you want to chat some more. I'll try and leave a little bit of time for Q&A. Being a live demo, it kind of could go down any route. So feel free to use the Q&A chat function. If we get time, I'll respond here. If not, we'll send out a list of FAQs to everyone after the webinar is closed. So with that, let's dive in. Now, the term CASB, or Cloud Application Security Broker, has been around for a long time now. I think Gartner coined it 2011, 2010, even something like that. There have been a number of iterations. We've had CASB, CASB 2.0, next gen CASB, kind of buzzwords thrown around, various different advancements in it, and that's really all been around the B in CASB, brokering that secure connectivity between the user and the resource that they are trying to get access to, predominantly on public cloud infrastructure. Although it could equally apply to, privately hosted cloud data centers or even on-prem servers. We see a lot of, legacy boxes under a desk somewhere that you need to give access to. And really, since the start of the pandemic, this proliferation of cloud-based applications has absolutely exploded. Remote users can now access the resources that they need to do their jobs anywhere, anytime, any device. Those are the kind of 3 words that get thrown around. So, I think we're all used to the app stores from Google and Apple on our mobile devices or on our tablets, and really that line has blurred and jumped to the corporate and the business users. So there are now probably tens of thousands, if not more, applications that enable us to, communicate, collaborate, just go about our day-to-day business operations using these resources that are no longer hosted within our kind of traditional network perimeter. And really, the days of that traditional network edge have long gone. Having that single choke point that IT can inspect traffic, can put their laser focus on defending the business is no longer an option. Yet more and more and more, we need to be hyper vigilant on what our users are doing, what they're accessing, and really how they may be putting our business at risk. But not only our business, our employees, our customers, and obviously the financial damage, the reputational damage of a data breach is something we don't really want to think about. So there are two terms here that start this conversation off, and that's shadow IT and SaaS sprawl, or this explosion of applications over our environment. And the terms have been around a while. They've both been acknowledged as problem areas. And I think it's fair to say that many organizations are still way behind the curve when it comes to either accepting the existence of things like shadow IT, or more so embracing it and actually managing their security environment with this notion of enabling or empowering the users to go and do their day jobs without having to try and kind of find workarounds or dig tunnels under the wall, so to speak. And in simple terms, SaaS sprawl, that first term, is really that proliferation of unapproved, poorly integrated, potentially illegal in some cases, cloud-based software applications that users access to do their jobs. They could even be services that were once used, a time ago and are now redundant. But for some reason or another, you still have a live or an active subscription. They may still have account permissions if they're integrated with, other tools. And that is pretty dangerous with an organization. And then there's the term shadow IT. So that's really the buying or utilization of, software, hardware, even, cloud-based services that are just not sanctioned and not approved by IT. Perhaps they have vulnerabilities in them. Perhaps they have dubious, data privacy policies that would mean, if it's something that I use every day, but IT kind of got wind of it, they may ban it. So users are sometimes reluctant to advertise the fact that they often bend the rules when it comes to, fair use policies and corporate guidelines on these SaaS applications. So those two terms are really what drives this presentation, and what we're doing with cloud application control and cloud security to address some of that. And the recent statistics, at least this year, around these topics are pretty eye-watering. Especially if you're an organization who has a relatively low appetite for risk. Some of these stats will, kind of give you that sharp intake of breath. The average mid-market or mid-sized enterprise has about 335 SaaS services or products active at any one point in time. And that number grows. It has grown over the past 12 months or so by about 25 to 30% year on year. So it is growing, it is expanding, it's just continuing that kind of upwards trend. And what's worrying here is over half of those 300 plus applications are not managed or not visible to IT. They might even not know that they exist. But the bad guys do. They are focusing more and more on, testing the defenses of these, shared responsibility, kind of ethereal cloud-based entities that we might think are secure if we're using, a big vendor's product that's in the cloud. But how we use it and how we configure it is a big part of that. And with over, as you can kind of see there, 300+% increase in attacks on SaaS infrastructure itself, they know, these bad guys are targeting, misconfigurations, vulnerabilities, human error. It's beyond just these kind of sophisticated phishing attacks or social engineering attacks now, where they're looking for credentials to take over an account. All right, they have this simple goal now. It's no longer fame and fortune as it was in the old days. It's how can I exfiltrate as much data as possible and then ransom it back. Data is the number one currency now on the dark web, and with this modern kind of hybrid digital workforce who access this data on an hourly, daily basis, it is the prime currency and rife for exploitation, unfortunately. And then there's kind of this other factor in the mix, I guess, here, as you call it, and that's this notion of user friction. And I've talked about this in the past, but there's this fine balance always of security versus usability, and how the kind of CISOs or the IT security leads have to balance off when they're in the kind of boardroom, this notion of business metrics versus cost and efficiency. So if you think about, most organizations' number one goal is drive profitability. Yet users quite often complain that, I've got security being deployed that is stopping me from achieving that goal, and you've kind of got to have this conversation about who is the ultimate decision maker here. We're seeing in the C-suite and in the boardroom that IT leaders, you can kind of see, over 90% of IT leaders here are coming under more and more pressure to effectively release their grip a little bit on and compromise on security to facilitate that top line revenue. It's never a conversation that's going to be comfortable for anyone. And as users, we've all got our own preferences. What is the right tool for someone might be cumbersome or ineffective for someone else. And because of this kind of user preference, what we're seeing is work often gets duplicated. Someone prefers Salesforce, someone else might want to keep that same data in an Excel spreadsheet. A lot of us are embracing these new AI tools that enable note taking and collaboration and analysis. The kind of list goes on. So for the average company, they're wasting in excess of, certainly in the UK, in excess of £150,000 a year on SaaS subscriptions that are either unnecessary, underutilized, or just duplicated. So that kind of feeds into the mix as well. So I guess to boil it all down to the most basic of ingredients, it really should be a simple case of educate your users on what is sanctioned, what is unsanctioned, what is good practice. Empower them with the tools that they want, they need, they desire to do their job, and keep that flow and that storage of sensitive data within your control. It's really those three factors. So it sounds pretty simple, right? But unfortunately, that's not the reality. And that reality is, having this user-centric approach, it's just one leg of the stool, right? Computer or internet-based security awareness training programs have been around for over a decade now, I guess. So the question you've got to ask yourself here is, why haven't these human-triggered breaches, they always called the human the weak link in the chain, why have they not reduced data breaches to a manageable level? And it really comes down to two or three factors. Firstly, a lot of the vendors' core capabilities are developed for one reason only, and that's regulatory or audit compliance. Some rudimentary behavior change, but really they're just tick box exercises. They often fail to make impactful change to the human element of that risk. And yet, absolutely, SAT, security awareness training, is a must-have. By casting that blanket over your entire workforce, it does start to become ingrained. People start to adopt secure passwords. They can spot basic, rudimentary phishing attacks. They take basic security precautions. Fantastic, great. That's a great place to start. But when it starts to then interfere with just getting your day job done by then piling technology on top of it, that is when it becomes a bigger problem. The good news here is things are starting to change. And, by the end of this decade, Gartner estimate that about 80% of all organizations will have a formal, measurable, correctly resourced human risk management program when it applies to the kind of digital roles and responsibilities they have. Today, that's about 20%. So that kind of 80-20 rule we expect to flip by the end of 2030. And that means really that all the controls, all the training centered around the person, the human, by by focusing on that measurable behavior, it allows you to then, become more than just compliance, more than just a tick box exercises. But you do still require that granular level of control at the device level, where a user accesses a SaaS application through a web browser, you've got to be sure that they're not doing anything to put the business at risk, either inadvertently or maliciously. And that's really the crux of this today. Sounds easy in theory, right? I think we're all used to things like, website categorization, URL classification with web security products. Even as a consumer, if I've got children, for instance, or I'm working at school, we know we need to monitor and restrict access to inappropriate content. Obviously many businesses do that today. And it should really be a case of working with your users to create that list of, these are the approved, these are the sanctioned apps, these are the services you need access to. As IT, we then go and evaluate them. We test the products. We read the data privacy policies. We decide what is acceptable, what isn't, and then you update your policies and your rules and your allow and block list to kind of represent that. But as I've kind of included in that picture, that's really akin to using this industrial digger to crack a walnut, right? This binary allow or block policy to a web domain or to a vendor service is just going to cause more friction. That there will undoubtedly be occasions where your users will need to access a resource that is blocked, and it just puts them more and more pressure on an already stretched IT team to look into it, to either just release it and say, yep, we accept the risk, or to, further evaluate that tool. So, if you think about the rate at which new apps are being published this year alone, with all the AI stuff in there, collaboration tools, we've got ever expanding digital partnerships and integrations, the supply chain connectivity that we have, there will be times when, you need to access, let's say, your marketing agency's file share to review a campaign, but it's being blocked because they use something different that isn't sanctioned for your business. Or, the sales guys have to fill out an RFP on a prospect system, and that's a system you don't support. So, they've then got to come to you, and, it starts to interfere with their work. So kind of, when the proverbial manure hits the fan, so to speak, pretty quickly IT become the bad guys, because you're putting these walls up to effectively hinder that goal of driving revenue and profitability. So, we need to find a solution to that. And that situation of revenue versus risk, or even just people doing their job unhindered, is unfortunately the reality of today. Users are absolutely choosing risk over security repeatedly. And the numbers, again, this is from Gartner this year, they don't really inspire confidence. This survey was a couple of months ago. Gartner found that 90% of employees have admitted to undertaking something that was, an unsecure action during the course of their work, knowing full well that they were increasing the risk to the business, knowing that there could potentially be disastrous consequences, yet they did it anyway. Over 2/3 of employees actively look to bypass the security measures that are in place for your protection. They're there to mitigate risk, but they went around them, and just around about 3/4 of them admitted that, hey, if there was a security measure in place and I needed to achieve my goal, I would look for ways around it. So you've got to kind of ask yourself, well, why is that the mentality in kind of the non-IT, and even in IT to some aspects as well? So it turns out that their responses for this survey were based on two things, really: speed and convenience. It make their jobs easier, less cognitive friction, closely followed by that was, well, the perceived benefits of me doing my job absolutely outweigh the risk. Whether that's something that's just in their mind or the reality, that's their perception. And, when you think about it, these companies that are striving for growth, maybe you're a startup or you're trying to scale rapidly, cybersecurity programs often lag behind those mission critical ones of revenue and profitability and growth. So, think about it. If you are on a commissioned sales role, your compensation, your take home pay depends on an objective that could potentially be at odds with the restrictions that IT are putting in place. You've got no incentive to be safe. This needs to become part of your company's DNA, right? No one is going to ever argue with profitability, mission success. It's a core value, it's a core metric. But when security is, polar opposites to that, or essentially there's a cost associated with it, that's when it becomes a kind of lower priority. But everyone in the organization really just needs to be aware that, that shortcut through the grass could effectively be, lined with snakes. I think, to coin a phrase, take a shortcut, you will eventually get cut short. And that's really what message we need to put it. It needs to be IT working with the wider organization where we're going to be most effective. And I've spoken about this before on presentations and panels, that if you compare companies like asset heavy organizations, so oil, mining, transportation, energy, safety is on a par with, or if not slightly higher than, profitability in most cases. Yet in these data rich industries, IT, accounting, finance, healthcare, it needs to have that same level of importance. It should be a core value to your proposition, not a separate one. And that's something that we need to address as a wider conversation topic. So what's my perspective on this? Well, it's really all about visibility. And that's kind of one of the key tenets to CASB, right? If you can't see something, you can't secure it. And that's in the context of shadow IT, we might only really be seeing a small portion of reality of what's going on. For those that take quiz shows, I kind of appropriate this to something like catchphrase, right? You uncover squares on a board to reveal a picture behind that you then have to guess. Well, some of these squares you can't remove because you don't know what's under them. So you either have to guess what's going on, or you ignore it and eventually get it wrong. And we know that for the vast majority of those mid-market users that are accessing SaaS applications through a web browser, as we all do, we can inspect that traffic, whether it's HTTP or HTTPS. And the best way to get visibility of that is to analyze what specific commands and actions that your users are doing. And that's effectively what we do at its most basic level. You can simply enable CASB, or Cloud Application Control, as we call it, with a single click, and then immediately start seeing what your users are doing. What is their intent? What are they interfacing with? What are they trying to achieve? And then from there, you get a feel for, are they sharing files with partners? Are they using risky tools? Are they using alternate tools that you've already got licenses for? And then you can start to refine your policies based on top of that. And, the great thing with the SensorNet platform is we've done a lot of that hard work for you. So there are, thousands and thousands of actions that we've already classified. We've given a risk score based on the potential for a data breach, and you effectively just need to fine tune them to your risk appetite, or tune them to your liking. And it's a really quick process. So you get a high level security posture out of the box. You're not annoying your users because you're only blocking high risk actions, not necessarily the tool itself. So you therefore don't create that disruption that they then go and try and kind of work around. And as a product person, it's something that I really, really love in our platform. It's even better when you kind of hear it firsthand from users. So, I can highly recommend having a look if you've got kind of 15, 20 minutes. So that URL at the bottom there, we hosted an event recently for accountancy firms, and a couple of our clients kind of stood up and just talked off the cuff about, their challenges, how the CASB solution helped them solve the problems, but also improve their kind of operational resilience and their efficiency. And it was really, kind of makes us feel proud when you hear that those kind of testimonies. So please, if you do get the opportunity, have a look at that URL there. So let's dive a little bit more into the design of our CASB, or Cloud Application Control. And I mentioned that granularity and visibility and control is key in minimizing that user friction. So we've developed this methodology or framework that we call ARM, our action risk methodology, which is basically the name for analyzing an application, looking at all the potential actions or activities that a user can do within that, and then assigning it a baseline score based on its potential risk. So we've got a catalog currently over 1,300 apps, thousands upon thousands of actions within those applications. And even if you use, some bespoke or niche application in an industry, we can run it through our, tools, our ML algorithm. We can analyze it and add it to that catalog in a very short space of time. And what's great about that risk score is it enables a really, really short time to value. You could deploy one single rule that simply says, block all high-risk actions. Click, you're done, and you'll go. With no further intervention, your users are really then secured against potential data loss, through what could be risky activity. Or you can then take it and fine-tune those defaults over time, knowing that you've got this really, really strong baseline posture. Now, our cloud control, or CASB, is what we call multi-mode, so meaning that it operates in line with traffic, as the actions are taken and the requests are made. So inspecting that traffic as it leaves the browser, or it can also be done in an API mode, which I'll touch on a little bit later. The inline solution is great because it sits on this foundation of web security. So something that we've been doing for many, many years now. And as the majority of users are going to access these SaaS applications via their browser, kind of day to day during operation, it makes sense not to recreate the wheel when it comes to inspecting that traffic. So we capture HTTP and HTTPS traffic, we analyze it, and then we have this architecture that I'll touch on in a sec called Direct Protect. That's built into web and CASB, such that you don't need this complex, proxy infrastructure like a lot of the vendors out there. You can enforce rules and policies locally on the device without impacting the user's kind of browsing experience. And then on top of that is our CASB module. Uses the very, very same policy engine and visual rule builder. So from a UI perspective, it's intuitive. You can just extend your protection from web, classification and URL categorization up to then intent and action-based things. And then you can enhance these, I guess, even further. So you can add the DLP module, which gives you even more granularity and security. So we've gone from, blocking or allowing services at its base to then allowing access, but perhaps blocking file upload. So that extra level of granularity, to now that third tier of being able to say, well, let's even allow the uploads, but let's scan the contents of those files for sensitive data or restricted data. So that's, a really, really powerful tool when we talk about that balance of kind of usability versus security. And then finally, on top of that, is this notion of the API mode. So there are lots of infrastructure tools out there through, AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, that fit really nicely into connectivity through an API. So where CASB looks at, data traffic flowing inline in real time, you can also look at data at rest. So is my AWS, configuration correct? Have I got file shares open with people without passwords? That configuration of, infrastructure and data at rest is that kind of top little cherry on top of the cake. So much you can do based on that kind of tiered model, and again, something that we do all of. So we touched on that Direct Protect as the kind of underpinning foundation of our web and CASB architecture. And what it means really is that, whilst you manage your policies in the cloud, so you have this centrally accessible cloud hosted platform, the enforcement of those is done closer to the user. So no complex routing of traffic, no forward reverse proxies or modifying the user's connection. So effectively what you're getting is, very, very low latency, direct access to the resource you're trying to get to, relevant regional content. If that's a Google search, for instance, you get it based on where you are, as opposed to, if let's say my closest infrastructure is in Frankfurt, with traditional proxies, I would get potentially German delivered content. So none of that to worry about. When you compare that to, traditional gateway or proxy architecture, that initial analysis of the request can take, a factor of 10 or more longer than this kind of ICAP methodology that we use, you've then got that infrastructure to manage. You potentially have to deal with bandwidth throttling, your user's real IP address being hidden, so the SaaS resource can't do allow and deny lists, and that can inject a lot of issues. So for the mid-market, that direct protect architecture is by far the best solution when it comes to cost, when it comes to usability, and then the efficiency of how it operates. A lot more can be talked about this, but I just wanted to give you that kind of high level. And then from a deployment perspective, that kind of ease and flexibility is a big differentiator here, right? So time to value or that return on your investment is significantly shorter when you compare it to some of those traditional competing solutions. And that's particularly true of CASB. We're using the same agents, the same gateways in an office if you want to do that, the same cloud backend, the same UI as web security. So you can really just enable it in a single click. You've got the choice of deployment, could be an on-device agent, could be a gateway if you've got major office locations, and it's obviously intelligent switching between the two, or it could be a hybrid mix of both. It only takes minutes to hours as opposed to days, weeks, and months to deploy. You can configure those initial policies pretty much out of the box. If you have visitors coming into office locations, we can do captive and guest portal or guest hotspots, such that you can define different policies for different people. You can cover BYOD and guest visitors. Mobile phones, tablets can be protected behind that gateway. You can even configure VPNs if you wanted to route traffic, although you don't have to. And because this integrates through a single AD connector, so email, web, CASB, MFA, identity all tie into your Azure AD or on-prem AD if you still have that. You can do role-based or device-based rules. So the world is kind of your oyster how you go about configuring it, but it is incredibly powerful and very well integrated to your existing infrastructure. So to kind of close out before we get into the demo, I kind of said we do a quick comparison of the experience of CASB. And I picked Defender for Cloud Apps here, as part of the M365 suite, purely because it's the most ubiquitous on the market. I'm not going to go into the minute detail. It's really from more an experience perspective. But then obviously on top of this, you've also got to consider deployment complexity, cost, operational burden, those kind of things. And as you've seen with the SenseNet platform, or to kind of allude to, it's a simple license entitlement and then basic fine tuning on top of that. Yet with Defender, it's proxy and session based. You've got to ingest logs. Potentially you need API connectors if you're not within the Microsoft stack. It's a much more complex deployment and management. And you can kind of see that when you think about this notion of granular control, that is key to having this kind of app catalog of action. So, if we dig a little bit closer into it, Defender itself has thousands upon thousands of vendors in its app catalog. However, the caveat to that is the level of control and granularity that you get, and that's where it kind of falls short a little bit, especially when you journey outside, the Microsoft ecosystem itself. Services are given a risk rating out of 10, so 0 to 10, based on some kind of arbitrary vendor attributes, reputation score, ISO compliance, a bunch of other things. And you can basically choose, as you can kind of see here, the green tick, allow or block access. There is a small handful of apps where they have an API connector, which you'll then configure, and that'll give you more granular control. But managing unsanctioned apps is really going back to that kind of analogy of hammer and walnut. It does become a little bit cumbersome in that instance. Now, if you compare the same visual kind of UI to our module, you'll see a much higher level of control and flexibility, right? This is just one SaaS application that you can see here. Each individual action a user could potentially perform within that has a baseline risk score. This is out of the box. As I alluded to earlier, then you can just kind of create a single policy that blocks everything in red there. And then if you don't like it or you want to enhance it, you just slide the little toggle up, and within a matter of minutes, you can get through your entire estate of apps and get that right security posture. So let's feel, for instance, say you think that deleting a Salesforce record is high risk. then you simply move that slider up and press save. That is it. No more complex than that. And these policies can be defined using that role-based access control. So could be different policies for different users, different groups, exceptions, bypasses, intranet sites as you require. You could even say, well, if a user's accessing via public Wi-Fi or they're not in an office location, then you may want more tighter controls in place. And that's all done through this kind of single UI. So extremely powerful and a true single pane of glass. But before we get onto the demo, I think, as I kind of said at the beginning, CASB's been around for a long time. It's as important, if not more important now than it ever has been. Don't take my word for it. You look at all the analyst predictions going out in the next kind of 12 months and then further. This is Gartner's impact radar for pretty much the next decade, based on what they see today. It does evolve, but I kind of look to the left-hand side, and CASB is one of their big bets. It has a very, very high impact on organizations. The risk of not implementing it is high in the short term. Beyond that, you'll see a lot of adjacent and complementary technologies. CSPM, or that posture management I talked about, automation and autonomy is going to be key. Composable or modular security, which is what our platform is based on, is a big impact one from them. And then identity-based security a little bit further out. All things that at SensorNet we're well positioned, and our roadmap allows us to intersect. So, it is great to see the analysts, also, taking on the importance of CASB. So, with that in mind, for those that haven't seen this before, this is kind of how CASB fits into our overall platform approach when we're addressing that mid-market. Cloud application protection is great when you need it, but it has to be taken in context of this wider protection stack, or you've got to protect the entire attack surface. So email security is critical, as is identity and user education. But from an operational perspective, you've got to be able to respond and detect threats autonomously without having to rely on security staff and complex SIEM systems and alerting. And that's where ACE fits in. And I'm not going to go into detail of this today, but think of this as an umbrella set of policies and rules that span these modules horizontally, whereas these modules each have their own specialist rules vertically. So you can pass threats across the modules. Think about this as creating rules on the fly, increasing that risk posture, starting to bring in more protection in a modular fashion, effectively all saving you time, improving your risk score, and reducing that operational burden. So this is effectively the SensorNet platform as a whole. So with that, hopefully my screen is still. Let's have a look at the platform itself. So if I log in to the USS platform, I'll kill my video for a minute so you can hopefully see this full screen. I'm going to walk through the CASB modules specifically on our app catalog, but obviously you can see from this there is much more to be configured. This is the home screen. You can see the individual rules and email, CASB, MFA, web security, and an at-a-glance view of your current posture. So I can kind of scroll through here, looking at what activity is going on in my environment, and all these are interactive. So I can click on that chart and get from a kind of executive summary down to a forensic level of detail in a very, very, very short space of time. But as we're here to talk about CASB today, let's start by looking at the app catalog. So, as I said, we've gone through and classified, 1,400 applications in various different categories. So when I started talking earlier about templates, you could just say, well, let's block all uploads to the cloud storage capacity, category, apart from my sanctioned app OneDrive, let's say, for instance. If we look at Salesforce, for instance, you can just search in the app catalog, and within the Salesforce application, and the demo gods are shining on me today, I can then go in and look at the rules and the actions that are applicable to Salesforce itself when that catches up. So there you can see within Salesforce, there are probably 50 or 60 individual actions that have this baseline risk score out of the box. And I can just toggle with the slider to whatever my appetite for risk is. Hit apply. It is as simple as that. You probably have a good, 80% posture at that point in time. So as I said, web security is the kind of foundational baseline for CASB. So this is where the rules are created and developed. So if you're used to setting up policies using our web security UI, then CASB will be just as intuitive and seamless. So I'll just pick an action here and we can kind of dive in a little bit to the visual rule builder. And this applies to both web and CASB together. It's very simple, 3 stages. Think of this as a firewall rule. So you're looking for a condition to match on, something that you do within that, and then a final action. So, we could start, as I said, very basically. Let's say we have a template that says SaaS action risk. Let's apply that to every day of the week, every month of the year, 24/7. And what we're saying is we're going to block activity in every cloud application that has a risk score of high or above. And hit apply. It's as simple as that. If the user then tries to do something within any cloud application that is high risk, we will present them with a template that we've predefined. So this will pop up in their browser and say, you're not allowed to do that because of these reasons. And you can configure these, as you see fit with custom branding and messaging and training and links and so on and so forth. We could do this based on, as I said, device group, device types. You can go into your AD and say, well, marketing and finance, I want to create a set of groups for, and I just want to have a generic action of cloud upload. So I'm just dragging and dropping tiles here. And let's say if I search for upload here, I want to say, well, I want to block anyone in those OUs from uploading a file, and we'll apply this template. So you can kind of see really, really simple drag and drop. There is nothing more complicated to it. So these can be incredibly powerful or incredibly customized. So let's jump over to the analytics section, which is kind of a key part of this. Visibility and knowing your users' activity is key. And like I said, this is a single click. So if you already have users with web security and you just want to tag on CASB, it's very straightforward. As I say, most people do a proof of concept over a couple of weeks. Enable it for the first week and start seeing what their users are doing, and then in the second week start defining their policies and their rules. So if we look at let's say top cloud application actions here, this will give me a very, very high level view over the last period of time I want to look at. So this is my kind of demo data. This is not our production portal at the moment. So if I look over the past month, I can see every user, the activity that they've kind of been doing. So I can see, there's a lot of sanctioned apps, Office 365. There are some YouTubes, and then there's a WeTransfer there. That's not a sanctioned application. What are they doing there? So with things like this, as you can kind of see from the homepage, these are fully interactive. So I can click on that thing that has popped up into my eyes and say, well, this is potentially risky, and you get to that kind of more forensic view of this. So I can see, well, in this instance, we've got a user over a period of time sending files over WeTransfer, but it's high risk, but we haven't defined a policy yet. So this is where I might go in and look at what exactly are they doing. So they've sent a Word document that is one of our provisioning forms to an email address via WeTransfer. Well, actually, I might want to block that. So I'll then go and define an action that says, well, if we see that again, block it. So as I said, you're set off with a posture, and just by looking at your user's activity, you start to build on top of it and start to create this much more comprehensive kind of view of things. So if we go back to the analytics again and look at top CASB risks, for instance, this is a kind of similar view, but now rather than looking at specific actions, and we're looking at what are the applications that are potentially putting the business at risk the most. So you can kind of see that WeTransfer is still there, but now we're starting to see other things pop in. So Dropbox here has been used instead of Teams, which is the sanctioned app. And then we've seen 2 PDF converters. Well, we use Microsoft Office. So if I want to convert a PDF, it's easy. I can go within PowerPoint, for instance, and just go file, export as PDF. Why would a user wanting to do that suddenly decide to use an online tool? And again, we can see here, this user has taken a PowerPoint, they've uploaded it to this I Love PDF, in this instance, file share, and got a PDF back. Great. But what we now need to do is understand, what is the risk of that vendor? Do they have a fair use policy? Are they GDPR compliant? A lot of these, when you upload a document to a cloud converter, you've lost any IP, and if they were breached, you've then potentially lost a lot of data. So that is, again, something that you would now go into a kind of more forensic level of detail and look at why they're doing this. Do they need to be educated? This is very, very quick from that initial report to see exactly what is going on. If we look at that from a user perspective, again, a slightly different way to carve that data up is looking at, well, which users in my organization might be putting me at risk, rather than the apps they're using. So in reality, you would have a bar chart of here with risky activity. So you can see this user here has done 27 risky things that we may want to go and looking to. And again, it's just a case of interacting with that chart, going in further, looking at that kind of forensic level of activity and seeing, do we need to educate them? Do we need to set any more policies? A lot of these are sanctioned apps, they're message sending, but we can start to see some higher risk things slipping in through file uploads, through through slightly more risky activity, in which case we might need to define policies. So again, it's all about visibility. I can see more, so I can now secure more. If we look at application activity, for instance, this may be, I guess, less about security and more about, well, what are my users doing during the day? So we can see here, for instance, there's a lot of activity within sanctioned apps, but there's also, let's take Outlook Personal, for instance. There's a little green jump here in activity. So we may see for that one day, people are using Outlook or Gmail personal accounts for doing work, because maybe they want to get around something, they want to share a file. Again, this is a policy we may want to look at a block and say, well, you can log into Outlook from your corporate domain, but any other domain we want to block. And again, having that level of granularity to be able to do that is an increasingly powerful kind of tool. But then, you might want to just look at inline cloud activity. And again, this is where the forensic kind of level-headed people amongst us might want to go in and say, well, I want to look at cloud activity at that highly, highly granular level. So let's pick, I don't know, let's say Office software here. Let's look at, we know I Love PDF popped up there before, so I can do that and then, run a report. And that will give me a quick view of every single user within my organization who has accessed that potentially risky application. Actually, there was no one in this one in the short space of time, but if I run it again, you'll start to see that that user there that we saw previously. So again, it's about getting that level of visibility to what is going on in my organization and how do I then balance that security versus usability and kind of user friction. And that's really it from a CASB perspective. As I said, very, very kind of whistle-stop tour of the platform, but hopefully you've kind of seen what it is capable of, and the potential power of that granularity and visibility. So that's kind of the demo. You know, I think as far as a call to action goes here, you know, what is really key is, you know, you've seen it, you've hopefully understood some of the context about why, but I would absolutely welcome you to, you know, perhaps have a further conversation with us. For those of you that use web security already, you know, we'll happily enable the CASB module, and you'll see traffic, as I said, immediately coming through, and really start to get a view of, as I said, how many apps are in your environment, what is putting you at risk. You know, do you need to educate your users a little bit more? Do you need to start fine-tuning your policies, or is it really bad and you need to kind of go back to square one? You know, this will give you that visibility within, you know, a matter of minutes and hours. So please, you know, do take up our offers, you know, to run a proof of concept or test this out. But it is, as I said, hopefully you've seen seamless, intuitive, you know, very easy to kind of deploy. So I'll take a bit of a breath there. I know we've kind of got a couple of you know, a couple of minutes left, but I'll say thank you for listening, spending the time with us, and we can take some questions for kind of 4 or 5 minutes if we have any. So I know one question came in asking around CASB, you know, working with web filter or web filtering. So, you know, part of our architecture, when I talked about that direct protect, is that, you know, we're looking at, you know, the average or mid-market organization's usage, which I said is accessing cloud applications through a web browser. It's HTTP, it's HTTPS traffic. So for the majority of users, yeah, it just sits on top of the web filtering rules engine and the architecture that is there. Having said that, you know, there are connectors that have been, you know, if an application like, I don't know, Teams or you know, OneDrive or Dropbox use some proprietary technology to upload. Maybe they upload files in chunks, for instance. Then we have API connectors developed that you can just apply, and that's the same through things like DLP. We use a file driver filter, so we can kind of look at the files. So it's not just sat on top of web filter. There are other enhancements, and that's really where I alluded to earlier, where it leads to things like CSPM and SSPM, where you can take that pre-existing API connection and then start to look at not only data in flight, but also kind of data at rest. So yes, for the most users in our kind of sweet spot market, it does sit on top of web filtering, but it goes way beyond that as well into, you know, API connectivity. And as I said at the beginning, it is a true multi-mode CASB. So you do have the option to do that. But again, you know, if you want to have a bit of further conversation, look under the hood, you know, talk techie with our SEs, then please do reach out and, you know, kind of, you know, have that further conversation. So looks like that was the only question. I said, you know, please do have a look at the website. We have some demos on there that you can kind of flick through, our product tours at your own pace, talking around not only, you know, CASB, but also web, email, and DLP. But with that, I'll, you know, thank everyone for spending the last hour with us, and enjoy the rest of your days. Maybe we'll talk soon in the future. Thanks, and take care, everyone.